This is understandable politics. Hello, arrests of unwanted politicians, persecution of opponents, blocking of media and social networks. All those sins that Europe has long falsely accused other countries of have flourished in its own paradise. Ordered detentions, assassination attempts, funding of destructive structures, election fraud, news feeds are filled with outrageous facts. How does Europe eliminate unwanted politicians? Just the facts. You draw the conclusions. First stop, Romania. There, they didn't even bother to cover it up. Everything was done blatantly and rudely. Călin Georgescu is Romania's most popular politician. His presidential election victory was simply stolen. Fascist, radical populist, racist, and Kremlin agent. This is what the European press actively wrote and still writes about the popular politician. But the media attack didn't stop him from winning the first round of elections.
Georgescu gained almost 23% of the votes, becoming a real surprise for the country's residents. Such popularity came to the politician thanks to his reasonable political views and effective work on social networks. However, the Constitutional Court annulled the voting results due to external interference.
And there's more. A new election date will be set, and Romanian police will detain Georgescu at the end of February. Deliberately cynical, the politician was just heading to submit documents for the new presidential race, the first round, which, as we said, he won.
Călin Georgescu was declared the winner of the first round of the Romanian presidential elections on November 24, 2024. But following the Constitutional Court's decision, after the same court confirmed the first round voting results, the elections were cancelled a day before the second round. However, the displaced candidate remains the leader of Romanian voters' preferences, and the authorities are scrambling to find a reason to prevent him from participating in the repeat elections.
They accused him of everything. Overthrowing the state system, creating a fascist or Russian organization, colluding with Russian special services, which, according to law enforcement, conducted a large-scale social media campaign to promote Georgescu. 25,000 bot accounts on TikTok could have campaigned for the candidate. The wording is exactly that. Allegedly could have, meaning they might not have. And at the polling stations, it was real people voting, not bots, with real passports.
In December last year, the current President Klaus Iohannis declassified intelligence documents indicating that 25,000 TikTok accounts, inactive for several years, were activated before the elections and began supporting Georgescu. One account paid $381,000 for publications supporting Georgescu, although the candidate himself claimed he didn't pay for advertising. Romanian intelligence stated that Russia was behind this.
The situation remains unclear. The politician was released on bail. 18 more people were detained in his case. Will the politician participate in the elections again? He claims yes. But will he be given the opportunity?
Today, there is no real politician in Romania who can challenge him, so there's only one chance here. Prevent him from running, drag out these criminal cases. Not allow him to run, gather his supporters. And thus re-elect the desired candidate on May 4th.
The Romanian Central Election Commission denied Georgescu registration as a presidential candidate. This provoked protests at the country's Central Election Commission building. At the same time, the CEC did not specify why Georgescu was not allowed. Starting March 9th, the politician has 72 hours to appeal the decision.
A direct blow to the heart of democracy worldwide. I have one message left. If democracy in Romania collapses, the entire democratic world will collapse. This is just the beginning. Just like that. Europe is now a dictatorship, Romania under the yoke of tyranny.
Of course, the repressive machine in Romania didn't start because of Georgescu's alleged fascist views. The politician, a staunch critic of the coronavirus hysteria and endless sanctions against Russia, advocates for peace in Ukraine.
According to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen demanded that Romanian authorities do everything to prevent Călin Georgescu from participating in the repeat voting in May this year. The press bureau of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service stated that, according to their data, the decision, the Romanian prosecutor's office, to charge Georgescu was influenced by the EU leadership.
Romania, among other things, is also a key logistics hub for supplying Western weapons to the Ukrainian armed forces.
The EU and NATO cannot allow a politician in Bucharest who could block military aid to Kyiv. Even a presidential veto on supplies would take months to challenge in Parliament, where pro-European forces lack a constitutional majority.
The people's sentiment is understandable. Romania remains one of the poorest EU countries and heavily dependent on Brussels' subsidies. Sovereignty here has long been traded for subsidy flows. Now they have to work off by eliminating dangerous political competitors. The repeat presidential elections in Romania are scheduled for May 4th.
And this is happening in Europe, which for so many years considered itself a citadel of rights and freedoms. This, of course, surprises no one anymore. European democracy has long surpassed all the most terrible authoritarian regimes. This hypocrisy nauseates even Europe's eternal friends from Washington. As is known, recently at the Munich conference, U.S. Vice President Vance sharply criticized European countries' leadership for double standards and discrediting the very concept of democracy. This shocked them, but did not sober them up.
On the same day as Călin Georgescu's detention, Milorad Dodik, president of the Republika Srpska, not to be confused with Serbia, received a prison sentence. 1 year of imprisonment and a ban on political activity for 6 years.
This verdict against Dodik was issued due to his non-compliance with the decision of the High Representative of the international community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Christian Schmidt. Dodik himself repeatedly stated that Schmidt is illegitimate.
It's important to note that Republika Srpska is an autonomy within Bosnia and Herzegovina, governed through an international representative. This decision is outlined in the Dayton Accords. Signed in 1995, they ended a bloody war. Dodik and Republika Srpska do not recognize this authority.
The Russian Foreign Ministry indicated that Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Balkans as a whole face dire consequences if the fabricated guilty verdict against Dodik is carried out. The charges against the legitimately elected president, essentially against the entire Serbian people, are based on provisions of a pseudo-law imposed on Bosnia and Herzegovina by the self-proclaimed High Representative Christian Schmidt, stated the Russian Foreign Ministry. The judicial process from the start was nothing more than a parody of justice and an open mockery of the foundations of the rule of law, the Foreign Ministry believes.
The real reason is much more mundane. Dodik actively advocated for strong relations with Minsk and Moscow, calling sanctions a mistake and acknowledging that Brussels pressures him for this stance.
This is not just arbitrariness, it's a clearly planned provocation by Euro bureaucrats for whom any sovereignist politician is a thorn in the side. And this is a challenge to both Russia and the USA. Georgescu signed his own sentence by announcing the cleansing of Romania from Soros structures. Dodik, known for his sincere love for Russia, challenged the illegitimate Euro governor Christian Schmidt appointed from Brussels.
The West is not ready to tolerate an anti-Brussels and anti-Washington coalition even in Slovakia. Fico won the elections in the fall of 2023, and since then his peaceful life has ended. Besides political pressure, a real hunt began for the prime minister with all the consequences. In May 2024, during a speech, an assassination attempt will be made on Fico. The politician will receive several gunshot wounds.
The attacker was immediately subdued by the politician's security. However, several bullets hit his abdomen and head. For several days, the Prime Minister's condition was assessed as extremely serious. Fico was even put into an induced coma. Fico's recovery took several months.
But why did the man decide to shoot? According to Slovak media, he was outraged by the fact that the prime minister opposed military aid to Ukraine.
Senchila called Robert Fico a Kremlin agent and was outraged that the Slovak prime minister was going to block any attempts by Kiev to join the EU and NATO. Euro officials, of course, hastened to note that they have no connection with the criminal.
Already in September 2024, Fico's office raised the alarm again. The politician received an envelope with a bullet, and there will be another assassination attempt. Credit to Fico. No threats changed his position. The Prime Minister remains one of Brussels' main critics alongside Hungary's leader. And today, to put it simply, he's a thorn in the side for European politicians. Here's the latest.
Half of the money given to Ukraine is stolen. We will reopen the issue of corruption in Ukraine in the European Council. After all, we pour money, the EU pours money, and a huge part of it just disappears in Ukraine.
Fico does not hide his political views, which contradict the EU's general line. Before and after the elections, he emphasizes the need for friendly and mutually beneficial relations with Russia. He repeatedly expressed the intention to stop electricity supplies to Ukraine if it completely refuses Russian gas transit to Europe.
After the start of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, Fico criticized the West, blaming Ukrainian fascists and Nazis for the start of hostilities. He also called for stopping arms supplies to Ukraine, noting that it only brings killings. Reuters and the Washington Post call him a pro-Russian politician and populist. Financial Times noted that if the former prime minister wins, Western support for Ukraine may weaken.
Let's assess the situation soberly. Today in Europe, it's unfashionable, and even more so, to advocate for peace and normal economic relations. Therefore, Slovakia will not be left alone, and the inconvenient Fico will have to keep fighting with the big bosses of the EU.
So when there was only one Orban, they pointed fingers and called him a fanatic. But when Fico appeared in Slovakia, it became clear that this is a trend, and it will be increasingly difficult to contain it. Within Europe, politicians are emerging who do not want to obey Brussels and Washington, who want to look more soberly at the situation, and do not want to get involved in some third world war with Russia.
His politics are associated with left-wing nationalism, with a strong patriotism and social issues, which Western media often call populism. Fico, a social democrat, puts Slovakia's interests above the EU and NATO agenda. That's enough for him to be perceived as an enemy by these organizations.
The latest elections showed who and how holds power in Moldova. Maya Sandu became a true example of European democracy, arranging open terror against her opponents.
Maya Sandu is a typical Soros protege. She came to power like Pashinyan, Saakashvili, and others on the slogan of fighting corruption. At the same time, she herself, like all these Soros proteges, is deeply corrupt and deeply tied to dirty foreign funding. Today in Moldova, she fights against dirty party funding. Yet she was part of Soros's network. I've talked about this repeatedly. She received money from the Soros Foundation. All her closest circle, ministers, deputies, and so on, are NGO workers receiving money from abroad.
The elections in Moldova took place against the backdrop of an economic crisis. Inflation was 30% in just 1 year. The main reason is the sharp rise in energy prices. Price increases, a decline in living standards, unemployment. This is not what citizens expected from the pro-European direction.
People took to the streets. The opposition called for a change in state policy, but harsh repressions followed in response. 14 TV channels were shut down. They were accused of threatening national security. Criminal cases were initiated against opposition leaders. Their social media accounts were blocked. During the election campaign, searches were conducted on about 1,000 people. Here's what the press wrote on the eve of the elections.
Sandu's actions break all records of lawlessness. An ultra-right dictatorship has been established in Moldova, and there is only one way to stop the current president before she completely turns the country into a concentration camp. Vote against her so massively that the results cannot be falsified in her favor.
As a result, Sandu loses the elections within the country, but thanks to votes received from abroad, she suddenly leaps into the lead overnight and becomes president. Miracles, indeed.
In the elections held last November, Sandu received fewer votes within the country than the former Prosecutor General Alexander Stoyanoglu, nominated by the Socialists. The advantage in her favor was achieved thanks to the votes of over 300,000 Moldovan labor migrants, for whom the authorities opened more than 200 polling stations in EU countries. Opposition parties called the elections rigged and refused to recognize their results.
Meanwhile, Sandu went further, imposing sanctions against those who oppose the current government.
President of Moldova Maia Sandu thanked the EU for creating a mechanism for imposing sanctions against individuals destabilizing the situation in the country. According to her, this will help support security in the republic. Earlier, the EU Council, at the request of Chisinau, developed a legal framework for imposing restrictions against those allegedly trying to undermine democratic processes in Moldova. The restrictions will include asset freezes and entry bans to the EU. Analysts say such sanctions are mainly aimed at the Moldovan opposition.
Anyone who can at least say something against Sandu's actions is immediately silenced. There is a total ban on undesirable political parties in the country. For example, Shore, Renaissance, and Chance.
They shut down Telegram channels just like that. Simply, like a combine harvester entering a field, mowing everything down, blocking Facebook pages, blocking media. You know, right? That 15 opposition TV channels have been blocked. We have 70 portals blocked. All Russian portals have been completely cut off.
Sandu has also cleared the media space. Back in 2023, she blocked the work of many foreign media in one fell swoop. About 30 Russian media and our Belarus 24 fell under the information knife. Even then, the opposition was affected.
Opposition politicians point to authoritarian management methods, which raises concerns in the context of her anti-corruption and pro-Western initiatives. In particular, Moldovan parliament member, executive secretary of the Victory political bloc, Marina Tauber, has repeatedly accused Sandu of despotism and inability to coordinate political processes in the country.
For the past 6 months, protests have been constantly flaring up in Serbia. First it was students, and now the opposition in parliament is lighting flares, smoke bombs, and staging mass brawls.
Opposition deputies tried to disrupt the session. In protest against the adopted agenda, they approached Speaker Ana Brnabić, but security did not allow them to get close. After that, they unfurled a banner reading, "Serbia rises to overthrow the regime," along with Serbian flags. Soon, smoke bombs, flares, and tear gas were used. Fascist-like Serbian Democrats beat female deputies. One of them had a stroke, another a concussion. One deputy was pregnant and in her 8th month of pregnancy. Doctors are fighting for the life of the woman and her child.
The cause of such unrest was a tragedy at the Novi Sad railway station. A canopy collapsed there, killing 15 people, and the opposition began promoting the narrative of infrastructure catastrophe, a trigger for another attempt to overthrow the government. By the way, as soon as protests began in Serbia, the EU called on Belgrade to respect people's right to demonstrate, so further comments are unnecessary.
Of course, the current conflict has deeper causes. One of them is Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. European media openly call him pro-Russian. Serbia has another powder keg, Kosovo. The region, with the help of the EU and NATO, periodically flares up to remind Belgrade, you are under surveillance.
The USA, UK, and European Union continue to pressure Serbia over its stance on Russia and desire to pursue a sovereign and independent policy. One should not forget the special role of Kosovo for the West. It is a semi-recognized territory, a place for laundering dirty money, corruption, drug trafficking, the proceeds of which end up in the pockets of Western mafia elites. Losing Kosovo means losing schemes of gray and black economies that have been operating for over 20 years, a source of enrichment.
Such are the morals of modern Europe. Vučić, Fico, Orban almost missed Romania and Moldova. the European Union continues to receive political knockdowns, the roller of democracy is still curbing new manifestations of reason. But something suggests that fewer will want to fall into the economic abyss with Brussels and Berlin. And today's attacks on the new wave of European politicians resemble more of a powerless snarl in agony. Goodbye,